Beginning in 1979, agents of the Iranian regime illegally seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and held more than 60 Americans hostage during the 444 days.
Actions of Iran have shocked the civilized world. For a government action to support and in effect participate in the taking and the holding of hostages is unprecedented in human history.
The Iranian-backed terrorist group Hezbollah twice bombed our embassy in Lebanon, once in 1983 and again in 1984.
The Iranians have no illusions about the cost of irresponsible behavior. We aim to deter further Iranian aggression, not provoke it. And if they threaten us, they'll pay a price.
The regime's two favorite chants are death to America and death to Israel.
I am formally announcing my intention to cut off all trade and investment with Iran.
The regime remains the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism and provides assistance to Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, Hezbollah, Hamas, and other terrorist networks.
Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
The United States and the United Nations Security Council sought a wide array of strong economic sanctions. But the previous administration lifted these sanctions just before what would have been the total collapse of the Iranian regime.
Over the years, you've heard me say that the United States was prepared to engage with Iran in a spirit of mutual interest and mutual respect. Well, that's exactly what we did. The national community lifted certain sanctions on Iran, and Iran gained access to money that had been frozen overseas.
History has shown that the longer we ignore a threat, the more dangerous that threat becomes. The United States no longer makes empty threats. When I make promises, I keep them. Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again. I will stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, and we won't be using a man like Secretary Kerry that has absolutely no concept of negotiation, who's making a horrible and laughable deal, who's just being tapped along as they make weapons right now.
It's the first time in 40 years that some officials of the two countries' foreign ministers openly met. That already itself was of a monumental importance, particularly in Iran. It had enormous symbolic importance that the foreign minister of Iran was meeting with the foreign minister of quote-unquote Great Satan.
So maybe just a few words on what you're expecting access to the U.S. dollar.
Do we have negotiators? Do we have anybody that knows what they're doing? I think it's going to go down as one of the worst deals in the history of this country, maybe of the world. Secretary Kerry goes into a bicycle race at 72 years old and falls and breaks his leg. I won't be doing that. And I promise I will never be in a bicycle race. That I can tell you.
Today is an historic day. It is a great honor for us to announce that we have reached an agreement on the Iranian nuclear issue.
As Iran takes steps to implement this deal, it will receive relief from the sanctions that we put in place because of Iran's nuclear program, both America's own sanctions and sanctions imposed by the United Nations Security Council. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Since the Iran deal, the JCPOA, was formed, we've really seen a partisan divide in the United States along party lines, where if you were a supporter of President Obama, you support the Iran deal. It was his signature foreign policy achievement. If you were an opponent of President Obama, you likely opposed the Iran deal.
For a start, I applaud President Secretary Kerry for their efforts in a very crazy and dangerous world to create an agreement with Iran which prevents Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. This is a huge breakthrough.
Well, look, you know, the president is the most important Democrat in the country, and he's obviously in favor of this. He negotiated it. It'll be a real challenge for him because I think it falls short in a lot of ways.
هدف اصلی برجام این بود که ایجاد اعتماد بکنه در جامعه جهانی از اینکه ایران به دنبال سلاح هسته‌ای نیست. در این حالی که ایران رو به طور دائم و برای همیشه از حقوق هسته‌ایش محروم نکنه و برجام این کار رو به دقت و به خوبی من فکر می‌کنم انجام میداد.
When the JCPOA was announced, we studied it carefully. But we concluded that the JCPOA was a very flawed deal and that no deal was better than a bad deal. And the JCPOA was a bad deal.
And I think this will be the way in which the Iranian leadership will invest the political capital, first of all, that this deal gives them, and also the money that the lifting of sanctions will produce.
The concern, of course, is that the militant Islamic State of Iran is going to receive a sure path to nuclear weapons. Many of the restrictions that were supposed to prevent it from getting there will be lifted. And in addition, Iran will get a jackpot, a cash bonanza of hundreds of billions of dollars, which will enable it to continue to pursue its aggression and terror in the region and in the world.
امروز داد و بیدادهای نتانیاهو رو میشنویم برای خودش عزا گرفته و نگرانی پیدا کرده. هفته آینده شورای امنیت در قطعنامه‌ای برای اولین بار در تاریخ خودش برنامه غنیسازی یک کشور در حال توسعه رو به رسمیت میشناسه.
خیلی خوشحالم از این توافق بزرگه که دکتر ظریف برای ما برنامه آوردن.
یه خود خستگیمون احساس میکنم در اومد. مرسی از آقای دکتر روحانی، مرسی از آقای دکتر ظریف.
امید این بود که با برجام و در واقع سرمایه‌گذاری‌های خارجی که در ایران صورت میگیره، شغل‌هایی که ایجاد میشه، افراد جوان که میرن سر کار، این باعث بشه که قشر متوسط و جامعه مدنی ایران تقویت بشه و از طریق تقویت جامعه مدنی ایران مسئله حقوق بشر بهبود پیدا کنه، دموکراسی بهبود پیدا کنه و اون آرزوهایی که مردم ایران دارن برای دستیابی به آزادی، خوشبختی و آبادانی، پیشرفت در واقع بهش برسن.
Leaders of the UK and Iran met face-to-face in a first such high-level contact since Iran's Islamic Revolution.
Iranian president arrives in Italy on the first leg of a groundbreaking
tour this week, just days after economic sanctions were eased.
Rouhani has arrived in Paris for the second leg of his French big business deals following the lifting of international sanctions.
So after a long period of isolation, Iran is once again open for business.
It is historic. It's a new adventure between an international brand on the Iran territory with Iranian partners.
مردم ایران از اپل خیلی خوب استقبال میکنن و محصولات اپل دوست دارن.
برندها و بعضی از کالاهای امریکایی در ایران جا افتاده بوده. بعضی از کالاهای ما رو امریکایی‌ها خیلی خوب علاقمند هستند. بالاخره ما روابط قبلی با امریکا در زمینه اقتصادی داشتیم.
دلار و سکه فعلا خیلی تاثیر گذاشته. از صبح تا حالا که فقط اسمش رو آوردم کلی اومده پایین.
I don't trust that government that they're putting anything on hold. They have so many different locations that they are doing what they're doing, and these are just wasting time.
A significant portion of the Iranian American community was against the deal. They understood that a regime that doesn't respect the basic principles of humanity, that has never abided by its word, you can't negotiate with such a regime. However, there was an additional group of people who were willing to take a risk. They thought that perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps if even a bit of the money that was to be released to Iran by the relief of sanctions would get to the people, then it was worth supporting the deal. It was worth tentatively taking that risk.
ایرانیان در خارج از کشور اون مذاکرات رو دنبال می‌کردند از طریق شبکه‌های خبری داخلی خارجی و توییتر و با امیدواری مایل بودن که این توافق هسته‌ای به سرانجام برسه.
His name is Trita Parsi. He's the founder and president of the National Iranian American Council.
This is a historic deal and something that history will judge quite positive.
33 مرتبه رسما نایاک طرف مشورت قرار گرفت با دولت مستقر در آمریکا و آقای پارسی واقعا کسی بود که تسهیل کرد این گفتگو رو که بتونه این زبان مفاهمه ایجاد بشه.
Secretary of State of the United States and the Foreign Minister of Iran are Facebook friends and they text each other and they DM each other on Twitter. In fact, they even have on a few occasions public exchanges on Twitter. Secretary of State John Kerry has spent more time with Javad Zarif of Iran in the last 2 years than he has spent with any other foreign minister of the world.
Unfortunately, there seems to be some confusion among some foreign banks. I want to emphasize, we lifted our nuclear-related sanctions as we committed to do, and there are now opportunities for foreign banks to do business with Iran.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome. صبحتون بخیر، خوش آمدید. Show me your hand if you have traveled from United States. Show me your hand if you have traveled here from Iran. Fantastic.
JCPOA was about legitimizing the Islamic Republic of Iran. It was about normalizing the Islamic Republic without forcing any fundamental change in how the regime operates. It goes to the nature of the regime, the illicit conduct of the regime, whether there's a JCPOA or there's no JCPOA.
47 Republican senators put their names today to this open letter to Iran.
Warned the Iranian regime that any nuclear deal not approved by Congress would be nothing more than an executive agreement,
which the next president could simply revoke with the stroke of a pen.
Signal sent at the time from a group of Republican senators with a letter to the Supreme Leader saying this is not a treaty. This is a piece of paper that you've signed with the current President of the United States. It's not even an executive agreement. It's a political agreement. And if we have a change of power in the United States and we don't support this as Republicans, then this agreement could be out the window tomorrow.
They should have insisted that this would not only have congressional approval, but actually would have to be treated as a treaty, which would have had to be voted for on by Congress and the Senate. You know, you still can come out of a treaty, but it's much more difficult. There is a reason why this has this complicated name, JCPOA or برجام. The United States didn't even want to call it an agreement.
I'd like to see the next president, if all of those countries have said this is good and it's working, turn around and just nullify it on behalf of the United States. That's not going to happen.
متن برنامه جامع اقدام مشترک یا همان برجام امروز به دست نمایندگان مجلس رسید.
حضرت آقای ظریف، شما در کجای تاریخ ایران حتی ترکمانچای که ما نقد همه چی رو تحویل بدیم از باب اعتماد کامل و نسیه همه چی رو از باب اعتماد کامل بپذیریم.
من به شما اطمینان میدم که زمانی که تحریم‌های شورای امنیت فرو بریزد تمام تحریم‌های دیگه آمریکا جز تکه پاره‌ای از کاغذ نخواهد.
با نام‌نویسی می‌کردیم 245 249 نفر بفرمایید پایین شما چه اینجوری می‌کنید؟ پایان رأی‌گیری تصویب شد.
برجام 2 که همون اقدام مشترک ملی است در داخل کشور آغاز خواهد شد.
این قرارداد قطعاً از دستاوردهای برجام.
ما امیدواریم که از همکاری و مشارکت شرکت‌های نفتی معتبر بین المللی برای تداوم این نقش سازنده در شرایطی برد برخوردار شود.
چه مهم است اشتغال پایدار در این کشور است و این کار با برجام 2 به حول و قوه الهی انجام خواهد شد.
در قضیه هسته‌ای توافق شد. این اسمشو گذاشتیم برجام 2 و 3 و 4 و الی غیر ذالک بایستی به وجود بیاد تا ما بتوانیم راحت زندگی کنیم. معنای این حرف این است که جمهوری اسلامی از مسائل اساسی که به حکم اسلام و به حکم برجستگی‌های نظام جمهوری اسلامی پایبند به آنها صرف نظر کند، یعنی خسارت محض.
سردار سلیمانی به تقلای دشمنان برای توافق در برجام‌های پی در پی هم اشاره کرد.
چرا اینقدر اصرار بر برجام 2 دارند؟ جریان‌های اسلامی خشکانده شوند در برجام 2. هدف اینه.
یک بخشی از حاکمیت در ایران بسیار ترس داره از باز کردن درها و نگران هست از اینکه اگر ایران به بازار بین‌المللی بپیونده، اونها منافع اقتصادی رو که در این جامعه بسته به دست آورده بودن از دست خواهند داد.
نمیشه، والا بالله نمیشه. تجربه زندگی سیاسی ما میگه نمیشه کشور با انزوا نمیتونه رشد مستمر داشته باشه.
در بحثی که مطرح میشه در برجام 2 و اینکه اگر سرمایه خارجی وارد ایران میشد و اونهایی که میداندار اقتصاد ایران بودن، انحصاری دستشون بود، تضعیف میشدن، این واقعا بحث درستیه.
سلام حضرت آقا.
سلام علیکم و رحمت الله.
قراردادهای جدید نفتی موسوم به IPC میتونه کشور رو به عهد پیش از ملی شدن صنعت نفت برگردونه. قراردادهای محرمانه که در اونها خودکفایی در صنعت نفت سرابی بیش نخواهد بود.
قراردادهای جدید نفتی که حالا محل بحثه، این هنوز چیزی تصویب نشده در این زمینه. تا وقتی که مطابق منافع کشور نباشه این نوع قرارداد بسته نخواهد. ما هم گفتیم
من حتی الان جرئت نمی‌کنم اسم قراردادایی که ما نزدیک به نتیجه گیری هستیم ببریم، چون میدونم فردا شروع میکنن رو اینا تمرکز میکنن که این قراردادها امضا نشه.
بخش تندروتر در ایران نگران بود و من فکر کنم در آینده هم خواهد بود که باز کردن کامل درها ممکن هست که منجر بشه به اینکه فشاری ایجاد بشه برای اینکه درهای سیاست هم باز بشن، نه فقط درهای اقتصاد.
You can't do business of any scale inside of Iran unless you either have the tacit or express approval of the IRGC or the Ayatollah's cronies.
What a dramatic night, what a close election. An earthquake unlike any earthquake I've really seen since Ronald Reagan.
President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
The office of President of the United States. Mr. President.
This morning, President Trump's first week in office, and it was jam-packed with presidential actions.
Issues a 90-day ban on nearly all travelers from 7 predominantly Muslim countries: Iran, Iraq,
the US
Libya,
seems
Somalia,
determined
Sudan,
to keep Iranians out.
If this is the first sign of how the Trump administration will be approaching Iran, then the fear is that the nuclear deal will not be able to withstand all of these tensions.
Iranian director Asghar Farhadi stayed home in Tehran in protest against US President Donald Trump's executive order.
The salesman, Asghar Farhadi.
The award will be accepted on his behalf by 2 prominent Iranian Americans, space tourist Anousheh Ansari and former NASA official Firuz Naderi.
Another American reportedly has been arrested in Iran. According to a number of published reports, Iranian security forces arrested Siamak Namazi, a businessman in his early 40s.
They include an Iranian-American businessman and his 80-year-old father. Siamak Namazi worked as a business consultant in Iran for several years and was arrested a year ago in Tehran. His father, Bakr, was detained last February after coming to
زمانی که نیویورک تشکیل شد، باقر نمازی که پدر آقای سیامک بود، مشاور آقای پارسی بود. و بعد آقای سیامک هم همیشه به عنوان مشاور بود و حضور داشت و بیشتر فوکسشون رو مسائل اقتصادی و نفت و گاز و این چیزا بود که در واقع متاسفانه دستگیر شد.
دادستان تهران اعلام کرد باقر نمازی، سیامک نمازی، فرهاد عبدصالح، کامران قادری، نزار زاکا و علیرضا امیدوار به اتهام جاسوسی و همکاری با دولت آمریکا هر یک به 10 سال حبس محکوم شدند.
دستگیری شخصی مثل سیامک نمازی که فقط به دنبال این بود که بتونه درهای اقتصاد ایران رو به روی جامعه بین‌المللی باز کنه و ایران رو کمک بکنه به اینکه در اقتصاد بین‌المللی حل بشه، شاید هزینه‌اش برای اقتصاد ایران به میلیون‌ها و اگر نه شاید میلیاردها دلار برسه، برای اینکه بسیاری از کسانی که می‌خواستن برن در ایران سرمایه‌گذاری بکنن بعد از این دستگیری تصمیم گرفتن که به چنین کاری دست نزنن.
The notion that foreign direct investment or foreign investment in Iran would bring about democracy is farcical. That's the same thing that the world has been saying for decades about China. And the Chinese Communist Party has not changed the way that it operates in terms of human rights, in terms of democracy, in terms of the freedoms. So that argument holds no water.